If you ask two separate people about the American dream, you'll get two very different responses. The first person will tell you, yes, the American dream is real, and I achieved it. I came here with nothing. Now I have two kids, a house, and a happy family. And the other person will tell you, the American dream was just that, a dream. Nothing more, nothing less, and it never existed. Today, I'm going to be talking about the American dream. More specifically, is it achievable? Is it true? Is it real? What is it? And is really the American dream or now an American nightmare? So, first, let's talk about what the American dream is. The American dream is propaganda that insists that your dreams are possible here. There's a whole bunch of different common symbols when people refer to the American dream. Number one is home ownership. If you're coming from a country that you're not allowed to own a home, then the American dream is very much alive and real because you are able to purchase a home here. Better education. We have better, on average, free education than most third world countries, which is good for a first world nation, but public education isn't necessarily considered the best in the world or world class. We do have, fundamentally, better colleges, but primary education is a bit more difficult to come by. Next, more opportunities for children. And if you're coming from a country with low GDP or just low opportunities, then yes, this is the obvious choice for you. Next would be entrepreneurship. You can start a business, you can run a business, and without much government moderation. Next, upward mobility. There's not a strict caste system here, so since there is no strict caste system, we have the ability to go up in a class. We have the ability to make more money, to become better citizens, and to become more free, which is, to my last point, freedom. We pride ourselves on Americans being free, and we have the Bill of Rights, we have the Constitution, we have plenty of doctrines telling us how free we actually are. Now, any of these symbols can be considered the dream for you, but it differs per generation with each shift of socioeconomic status. I fundamentally believe that. Next, we're going to talk about some objective truths. The richest country ever. This is absolutely the richest country that has ever existed. Nothing comes even close. Next would be some of the best schools in the world. Like I said, not necessarily for primary education, but I would say for higher education, such as college, we have the best in the world. Some of the best. Yes, England can compete. Yes, there's some Chinese schools, but as far as higher education, the U.S. definitely has more schools than any other country. Now, we also have class mobility, and it's proven. There are some anecdotal and real case studies. I'm going to get into some anecdotal stories and case studies. Andrew Carnegie, one of the first big monopolistic evil businessmen that we've ever encountered. He wasn't necessarily that evil, but all business tycoons back then and today are still widely considered greedy and sometimes evil. He was a steel tycoon, along with John D. Rockefeller, who of the same time period was an oil tycoon. And they were competing for a while until they created the world's first duopoly, which is two companies competing in the same field, but there is no other companies that are allowed to compete. So they will dismantle any other organizations that try to compete in that field and only compete with each other for market share. It actually does benefit companies to do this rather than just being a single monopoly. I mean, single monopolies obviously are great because you get to set the market, but then you have government interference. With duopolies, there's not much government interference because there's direct competition, so you're just kind of flying under the radar, but still making an insane amount of money. Sam Walton, the Walmart founder, grew up in public housing and eventually founded Walmart, the biggest retailer in the world and one of the largest employers of American citizens in this country. Jay-Z, a rapper, he was a drug dealer before, and he became a very successful entrepreneur and businessman through rap, through business deals, through savvy negotiations, and through marriage. There is a lot of benefits that he's been able to achieve from relatively impoverished circumstances. There is plenty of rags to riches stories. There's Oprah Winfrey. There's a million cases you'll see of this. So, With all of this considered, I'm now going to get into my stance on the American dream. And yes, I fundamentally do believe it exists because I've seen it. I've seen it. But I also believe it depends highly on personal values and socioeconomic status that drive this vision more than anything else. For example, for me, I think that me and my best friend, we grew up in very similar circumstances. We didn't grow up with very much money. We grew up in single parent households, and we didn't necessarily have a lavish lifestyle when we were younger. We were on the lower end of the socioeconomic status, which is fine, but that wasn't the main determining factor whether we wanted to be successful or not. I think it was personal values, because while I persevered and I continued to push and I still push for greater things, my friend decided to get a job and settle for a life with a house, wife, kids, and that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but that just shows that socioeconomic status doesn't mean everything, and it does contribute a lot to personal values. Another way is that an immigrant coming to this country may just be looking for a better future for their children, higher education, or just freedom in general. Meanwhile, their children aren't going to be looking for freedom because they were born with that gift already. So they may be looking for entrepreneurship or upward mobility. Now, to also talk about how the American dream has been affected over the years, our buying power for necessities is a lot lower than it's ever been. But for consumeristic type of products, it's higher than it's ever been. For example, TVs are super cheap compared to what they used to be in like the 1960s. But houses were a lot cheaper back then as well. You could even buy a house from Sears and build it yourself. Did you know that? Because that's kind of wild. I would love to do that. But our buying power has struggled a lot. And, you know, there are certain issues with our economic system. So the American dream is not easy to achieve, but honestly, it's never been that easy to achieve in general. A lot of the people that got to benefit from the primary wave coming back from World War II, they got 0% loans. They were basically gifted houses for pennies on the dollars in suburbia. And you can still go to the military for 4 years, get a VA loan, which is a 0% loan, and buy a house. They will still give that to you. And you can buy multiple houses. You can do this with like 10 or 20 houses. It literally doesn't matter. If you have veteran status, you are protected in this country and can use that to your advantage. They can also pay for your school in the military. There's plenty of things you can do. Now, if you're not in the military, you still had a much easier time buying property back then, which is a shame because I feel like property should be a human right, but it usually isn't. So now you have to struggle in one of the most competitive economies that the world has ever seen, and you're going to be competing with people who've had an unfair advantage for over 100 years over people like you who are either new or just trying to achieve more in this country. The American dream has never been easy no matter what, though. These people who did buy houses for pennies on the dollar, they still had to work jobs. Not just jobs, but they had to work probably 6 days a week or 5 days a week, and they still had enough money to provide for their family. They had 2 kids, they had a wife that stayed at home, and now in this current economy, that's not necessarily feasible, but it's not like the life was gifted to them. They still had to work. Now, no one said the American dream should be easy, but it should also be achievable, and I've seen it. I think the main advantage that our generation has is mainly technology. For example, you can look up anything you want to. You don't need necessarily a degree to make money. You don't need a degree in business to make a business. You don't need an engineering degree to fix something, to build a new system. But it just makes it a bit easier to get a job with all those degrees. So that just means that you still do have the potential to learn things. You have the potential to do whatever you desire, and it's also been easier to learn than ever. You don't necessarily need a degree. You don't need someone to tell you, oh yes, you're okay to do something now. You can just start to learn it and practice it. We have the most information we've ever been gifted in the history of mankind. A lot of people tend to use these tools like phones, like social media, as kind of gray noise, white noise devices that kind of occupies their mind and keeps them busy. But you also have one of the greatest opportunities we've ever known to learn anything you could ever possibly want to right now. A lot of what I've learned through business, most of what I learned through business, if not it's from other business owners, it's all been through YouTube or online. Now, not all the information is that useful, but I think that without YouTube, I would not know nearly maybe a quarter of what I know now. I wouldn't know any of the people who got successful without the internet. Everyone who I know around my age who is successful has gotten successful through learning online and making connections online, which is an undervalued skill that we can actually use. And I'm not just talking about AI or just the ability to learn in general, but it's just a lot easier to get things done and learn new skills through the internet. A lot of people aren't using this to their advantage. And just because the American dream doesn't exist like how it did back then, doesn't mean it doesn't exist for you now in the way that you want it to. You can still achieve whatever you want. You just have to work a little bit harder and a little bit smarter than your predecessors did, because they were likely given a lot more than you were. Just because they were given a lot more doesn't mean that you can't achieve just as much, just working a little bit smarter than they did. You don't have to work in a factory. You don't have to do the things that they had to do to buy a house. You can simply go online, learn how to start a business, and the main thing is fail a lot. You're going to fail, and that's normal. The American dream is still alive and well. It's just a lot harder to achieve than ever, but you still see it. Every single day, there's either a new scammer on social media trying to achieve it, or people in your personal life. They've gone from job to business, and they failed a lot, but eventually you're going to win. You fail enough to where you learn, and once you learn, you don't fail as much anymore. So my take on the American dream, it still very much does exist, but it is very hard to achieve, as opposed to when it was the 1960s or 50s. But if you think about it, someone of my skin color in the 1950s or 60s would have a terrible time trying to achieve the dream as of today. Thanks for watching. If you like, we should subscribe. See you soon.